The antediluvian history of humanity goes from the beginning when God created Adam all the way until the flood happened in the life of Noah. Antid means the Latin for before or pre. Diluvian is the Latin reference to the deluge or the flood. So we're looking at the flood history, pre-flood history of humanity. When you look at Genesis chapter 5, what you see are these. You see 10 names. You see the age they were when the next person in line was born, and then how long they lived after that person was born, during which time they had other sons and daughters. And then you see their full length of life. And we look at this, and oftentimes we just see a list of names. We miss some details that are actually rather fascinating and perhaps telling about what was going on during this time and what people thought. First thing I want to show is that this is not a list of the firstborn. Seth was Adam's third son, so there is no other reference the to the other two sons, Abel and Cain. And so this list really isn't necessarily a list of the firstborn. This is simply the list of the people that God chose to work through down to Noah. So you have Adam, who lives 130 years after, basically after the garden. So if you're wondering, well, how long were they in the garden? Well, they weren't there longer than 130 years, obviously. Um, so he lives 130 years, has Seth, and then lives 800 years after 930. So Seth comes on the scene 130 years into human history. So that's kind of interesting. And then he lives 105 years beyond that, and he has his son Enosh, and so on and so forth. And we learned from chapter 4 that during that time, at the time when he has Enosh, men begin to call on the name of the Lord. Call on. Something different happens later on. So Enosh has Kenan, Mahalalel, and so on and so on. You get down to Jared. Jared has Enoch at age 62 and then lives another 800 years, 862 years total. Well, Enoch has Methuselah at 65, and that's getting to be the regular age now to have the next person in line. And he lives 300 years, 365 years total. What we fail to see just from this list, doesn't just leap out at you, is that he died while Adam was still alive. And when we think of it that in those terms, then we can see, okay, wait a minute, these guys are all living at the same time, and or dies. He doesn't really die. See, that's the thing. He vanishes. He walked with God, and God took him. And what we learn from Hebrews is that he didn't see death. Well, why? What was he doing? It says that he walked with God, and that comment is not used on any other of these people. Enoch has Methuselah. Methuselah lives 300 years, or lives 187 years, has Lamech, and then he lives 782 years beyond that. It's 969 years. He is the longest living human being. He lives to the end of the antediluvian history. And then comes Noah. Lamech lives 182 years and has Noah. Again, they're kind of extended now. And then he lives 777 years after that, which is, a set of three sevens. It's got to be significant in some way, shape, or form. Anyway, he lives 961 years. He actually dies 5 years before the flood. 5 years before the flood. So Noah it lives 500 years, has Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We're not even told if he had sons prior to that. He may have, and they may have all gone wrong. Maybe he was just S, H, and J that had that, actually went right. And then 100 years after he has them, they're 100 years old when the flood happens. Now, and you get that from chapter 7. So this is still a list of names, big deal. So here's how it works out in human history. So Adam is 0 to 930. You have 130 to 140, 1042 for Seth. He lives until 1042. And then so on, 1040, or 1140, 1240, 1295, 1327, and 892. Just a sudden, abrupt, quick life, comparatively speaking. He lives until 892. Nobody has died yet. It's about 100 years, or a little bit less than, I guess it's 40 years, before his great 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 grandfather Adam. And so that had to make a mark on people. That had to show up as sort of an event. Wow, what happened to Enoch? What they say about him is that he walked with God and God took him. He didn't die. There's no burial ground. There's no the normal things that go along with death. For some reason, this guy had a short life on earth, but apparently a longer life with God. And Methuselah is born. Methuselah lives, he's born at 592. So all these people before him are alive when Methuselah is born. In fact, they're all alive when Lamech is born. Lamech is born hundreds of years before Noah, or before Adam dies. In fact, he's born before Enoch dies, or Enoch is taken. So that's another kind of an interesting, he was about 100 years old when a little over 100 when Enoch is taken, and Methuselah lives until 1561. So that's the oldest one. Noah is born after Adam dies, about 30 years after he dies. And so all these other ones, Seth all the way to Lamech, are alive. And he begins to watch them die off one by one. Men begin to call upon the name of the Lord in Seth's lifetime. And they begin to die off one by one by one by one. And it was almost as if lights were going out. He was born after Enoch. He simply heard about Enoch. He didn't know him. He didn't see him. So this is another way of looking at it, simply by terms of numbers. The total antediluvian period is 1561, 1,561 years. We think of it as since they lived to be 900. Well, it must have been a very long time, thousands upon thousands of years. And it's not. It's actually fairly short when you look at it. In fact, in terms of human existence after the flood, it's extremely short. So let's look at it this way. So let's say this is the entire length of 1561 years. And in that, Adam lives 930 years. He gets a little over half. And then after him comes Seth, and he goes 100 years after his father, and about 100 years, or starts 100 years after his father, and lives about another 100 years after that. Same thing with Enosh, and the same thing with Kenan. And then we're going to jump ahead. So then, you've got Mahalalel and Jared, and then you have Enoch. Enoch is this really strange 365 years that he lives. A real short time period. It's very odd, out of the norm. It just jumps out at us at how small it is, right smack in the middle of that period of time. Then Methuselah lives all the way to the end. Either he died in the flood, or he died right in the same time that God opened up the floodgates. His son, Lamech, dies 5 years prior. As we see here, 1556. He died 5 years prior to the flood. And we have Noah. Noah was born and named by Lamech. Lamech named him because he was going to reverse the curse on the land that God had made when he cursed Adam. That was what Lamech prophesied over his son. I don't think he understood exactly how that was going to happen. So what we see from here is that we have a list of names that God is using. And what these people probably learned is that what God wanted from them was a walk. But they are the only ones on the list. 10 people make it on the list. Out of all people living that had other sons and daughters, you have the people of Cain are not even on this list. And so what we have here, we have a list of people who God has selected, God has chosen, God has worked with, or who have agreed to work with God, you might say. He tried to work with Cain, and Cain didn't want any of it. So we have people that God is trying to work with. And the question that should rise in our minds is, how do I get on this list? Enoch walked with God, and God took him. The answer to the question is to walk with God. What does that mean? How do I walk with God? Walk is a daily process. It's our life. It's not in addition to the other things that go on in our life. It is our walk. It is our life. It's when our feet hit the floor in the morning and everything that happens until our eyes close at That's our walk. That is what God is calling us to. That is what he wants from us, and that's how we get included on this list. A walk with God has been very difficult. Very difficult. 1 out of 10 had what was commented as a walk with God. Actually, Noah said, the comment about Noah is that he had a walk with God as well. So we're left with this kind of a rare process, even among people who God is working through. So the walk with God, the daily walk with God, is that walk of faith that's described in Hebrews. So there's this whole roll call of faith, or this list of heroes of the faith, however you want to call it. And at the end it says, but none of them saw what they were looking forward to, because they will not receive what was promised before us. We have all been waiting for Jesus, because it is Jesus who enables a walk with God. It is Jesus who says, who basically makes it possible for that walk to happen. It wasn't something that comes about in the law. In Deuteronomy 30, it says that, see, I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life. Choose life. It's just like the garden. And it says, by loving the Lord your God and listening to his voice and holding fast to him, for this is your life and length of days. That right there, in the law, is the declaration for me that indicates how that walk actually works. How does that work? That works by loving the Lord your God, by loving him. Not obedience because if we get this some sort of payoff at the end. Not being obedient because there's a return on investment. Because if we don't see the return on investment, we just stop being obedient. It's not out of love. It's not out of devotion. It's like it's coming up on Christmas. We're being good because we want to get those gifts that we have been hoping for. So we'll be good because people haven't yet gone Christmas shopping yet. So November hits and we're good people. Well, that's not what God wants. God wants a daily walk with us. Good, bad, wonderful, not so wonderful, terrible things happen. He wants us to walk with him, and he will walk with us through it. That's what he wants. That's the goal. It's not the special effects, healing, and all these other kinds of wonderful things that God will do. It's not to see the feeding of the 5,000. It's not to see the miracles. It's to walk with the miracle worker, to walk with the one who made the universe. The daily grind with God, trudging this sod with the one who formed it out of nothing. That's what God wants with us. That is how we get included on this list.